What is up, everybody? We are live. For those of you checking in live, literally none of you, because you're probably not gonna. That's okay though. Um, we are here with our fourth deep dive of Big Brother Hometown Season 1. What a season that was. For the record,
It was.
it was crazy. For the record, Season 2 is currently happening. We're in the middle of, like, as I speak, double eviction. So things are going down. So if I'm like scattered a little bit at any moment, it's because something happened in the game. I'll keep you updated. Maybe we'll have some fun with that. But that's not why we're here. We are here to talk about one of probably the players that came in with a huge target and threat on his back because of who he is, but played a very under the radar game, though I think a very strong game. Um, and that is Chris Griffith. Yay! How's it
Hi,
going?
everybody. It's pretty good.
It's been almost probably close to a month now since, at least since you were evicted. So you've had a lot of time since the game ended. I'm sure you haven't thought about it too much, but I'm sure you processed it a little bit because it's a unique experience. It's something different. Coming in and coming out, what do you think about this game as a game that exists?
Yeah. So I had been vaguely familiar with Big Brother as a concept, as a show. And so I didn't really know what to expect translating that to a game. But I think that if I had even tried to make an idea of what it would be, I wouldn't have come up with what it actually was. And it was better than anything I would have imagined. I think overall as a game, it had so many fun elements of things that I've enjoyed from TV and games and just all these sorts of things. So I think that it's just a really fun way to be competitive, be ridiculous, be very um, plotting and making lots of different moves. There's social gameplay out the wazoo. So I think it's very something that people that enjoy competition and social gameplay will very much enjoy. And as a person who enjoys those things, I very much enjoyed um, having been through it. Like I said, it definitely was not what exactly I would have expected, but it was so much better.
It's funny. I think this is like widely known to people that watch Big Brother and Survivor, is that like Survivor bills itself as this really serious game out in the wilderness, and it's like this super serious game. Um, but Big Brother bills itself as summer of drama and you're all in a house. When in reality, the game of Big Brother is much more layered and intricate and difficult, I think. In terms of a game, I think Survivor's probably more difficult because you're not eating, but that's aside the point.
Right, right.
um, but like I almost wish, and this is maybe a deep cut, but I watched Big Brother Canada. At least I watched it last season. And while they do love like the drama and the wackiness, they take themselves a little more seriously in that like the game is a real game. Like in advertisers, when you watch Big Brother in America, you're watching the game and you're watching mostly that with a little bit of the silliness in between. Anyway, that's for another day. We're here to talk about Chris's game and really what went right, what went wrong. Talk a little bit about pregame. I know there was a little bit of pre-gaming going on your end, um, particularly with Bradley, but you can talk about who you may have talked to, didn't talk to, whatever.
So before the game started, we kind of got a general idea of who would be in the game. And in season one, these were all people that Josh knew personally. So for the most part, it was all people that we knew personally. So that kind of played into the pregame aspect. You kind of had your own presuppositions of who a lot of these people might be, how they might play the game. And so that obviously played into any of my pregame decisions as far as who I was going to potentially talk to and see what they were planning on doing. Um, it was difficult though, because you don't want to start out on the wrong foot, obviously. And so trying to figure out how to approach those first interactions was really weighing on me heavily. Like, I just didn't know what the best approach would be to kind of like open the door on a lot of these conversations. And I think as like the time between Josh announcing like, hey, this is a thing that's happening and you're a part of it, until the point of, hey, this is 00 or day 0, or you're going to like enter the house. I could tell that like other people were potentially talking to each other. So I just slowly got more and more to the point of like, you know what, if I don't do it now, I'm going to be way behind. There was legitimate fears as the days were really getting close to day 0 that I legitimately thought there might be these whole huge alliances that I wasn't a part of. I legitimately at points was almost paranoid. And so I think what really motivated me the most in choosing who to talk to was trying to pick someone who I believed, even if they might have been in on one of these big discussions, who at the end of the day, I really thought I would be able to talk to on a real one-to-one basis and get the honest answer from. And so that's why the first person I talked to was Bradley. Because even if he had been talking to a lot of other people or no other people, I knew that at this point in the game, at least I felt like I would get an honest answer from him. And that's what I got. And he also was very excited that I contacted him, because he said he had done a little bit of reaching out. But he had said that he really was worried the same thing was happening, that there were going to be these huge alliances that had already formed and he had missed the boat. So I think that kind of helped us both feel a little more like, if neither of us have about these big groups, then maybe we haven't missed the boat and there aren't these. Which, fun fact, may or may not really be true, because I later learned, as one of the next few people I talked to, who was Sarah, I learned from her that there had actually been plans for a huge alliance between her, Ian, Drew, and potentially someone else. But that never happened, especially from Eric Marcy being one of the cast members to Allie. Anyways, back to my game specifically. So I talked with Bradley, and that whole conversation went really well, and it progressed into a couple days before the actual day 0, where we really built this strong connection. He had mentioned possibly working with Lane or Ashton, and I said I wasn't against it, but fundamentally, my most planned and secure thought was just me and Bradley working together by ourselves. I hadn't 100% convinced him of that, but I was willing to try and move him in that direction.
Your video is a little spotty, but I was able to hear pretty much everything you said, so that's good. So you would say pretty safely, I think he would say, I'm pretty sure he did say the same thing, that for the majority of the game, probably, but certainly at the beginning, Bradley was your number one, so to speak.
Yeah.
So then day 1 hits, and that's when, and I think this happens on all kinds of things like this. Pre-gaming can only mean so much before the ball drops and it's time to really play. And the game started. So then we have the Plague immunity. Gosh, I'm in Survivor World. Plague HOH competition. And what happens from your vantage point? What do you think? What's going on? Because Bradley wins this HOH, which is good for you.
From my vantage point, it was really the way the Plague Challenge worked. There was a lot of potential for strategizing, and a lot of people wanted that to happen. So there was a lot of communication because people wanted to make sure, basically, they wanted to plan it all out so that who was advantageous to them would win HOH. Mm-hmm. So I got a lot of communication from Bradley, obviously, and I got a lot from Sarah and Drew, but was really that worried about me or what I was doing, and I was okay with that. There was this alliance side, whatever you want to call it, forming between Allie, Ian, and Ashton and Lane. And some of that I feel like was perpetuated by Sarah and Drew myself. And so this was probably the point in the game during this Plague Challenge when we really decided that there was going monkeys in the middle. And that was really exciting because that kind of determined my whole strategy throughout the rest of the game. Being in the background, being someone that wasn't necessarily making huge moves that everyone could see, was safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It kept Allie didn't have these big suspicions of me for pre-game reasons and nothing that I had done within the game. And so that's kind of where I realized, you know what? The people that were in the middle that weren't side, even though Bradley was technically in their group chat for their alliance and on their side, he wasn't really a threat because clearly he passed him one HOH.
Mm-hmm. So were you behind really Bradley in everything he did in his first HOH? I mean, I'll remind you, he put up Daniel and Ian. Daniel won the first of many vetoes, pulled himself. Drew's up. It's Drew versus Ian in the first vote of the game.
So I would that. I think me and Bradley discussed it for sure, and I think there was a lot that went into that conversation. We were both really realizing that this was a big moment. I think my strongest push was to get rid of either Ian or Allie, and I don't recall. I think I recommended Ian and Allie as the two noms originally, and I think that Bradley kind of took that with a little bit of his own ideas and made his own decision on that. But I think it worked out. I think that it was a hard call, and I see why he would want to seem a little bit more neutral. And like retrospectively, that might have been a more beneficial move than just really gung ho going for Ian or Sarah or Ian or Allie.
Yeah. So Ian goes home. That's obviously a big move right off the bat. But as you said, it was kind of, I mean, the four-person alliance, the couples, so to speak, take a hit right away. And so that's probably good because that's what most people wanted.
Right. And so while it was, I guess, like targeting somebody, for the most people in the house, it seemed like that was the biggest threat. So really there wasn't a lot of people to upset and stir. And the way he kind of did the nomination and the veto, he may have ruffled some feathers as far as like Daniel and Drew were concerned, but it seemed like he was maybe able to smooth them over.
Right. Yeah, I think he was. I mean, obviously Bradley makes it pretty deep. So,
yeah.
So back to back, the Consalvos sweep the first two HOHs, and Ashton is HOH. I can't imagine that you were feeling any in danger, even though you did evict Ian. You were still one of many.
Right. I think with Ashton won, I think this was one of the weeks where I was frustrated because it was really sinking in that the HOH has all the power and no one else has any of the power. And I think I spoke to that in the diary room. But it was still fine for me in the sense that I didn't think that I was Ashton's biggest threat. I wasn't the person she was really looking to get rid of that week. So I think it mostly was more of a realization of how the game is all about power. And when you can have power and not necessarily be the person holding it, you could still influence the game and assert your own power and your own decisions. And so Ashton wasn't someone that in that moment I thought I needed to heavily influence. But I did feel like if I could in any way push her towards going after Sarah, that it would be beneficial to the game. And I think it was kind of when I realized that this point that the monkeys were supposedly in was kind of it felt like we could still be in control. And basically what we wanted to do was just kind of play the two sides of the house against each other back and forth while we're just safely here in the middle.
Well, I mean, I think this. I was going to talk about this later, but we could talk about it a little bit now. I mean, that's kind of was your ideology throughout the game in that having power is dangerous. Do you think you balanced that well? You didn't win a single competition, so I guess you tipped the scale on just absolutely one end. But, well, I guess so. So Sarah does go home. This, I think, is a good point to talk about this because the next HOH is the competition that you had won on multiple occasions. And, and this is easily in 2 seasons of doing this, or a season and a half, my favorite diary room videos is you recalling this competition because this was the Press Your Luck competition. Chris had picked the 50 box, considered picking another
on the first pick.
On his first pick, and then in the tiebreaker, his first pick was 42 points, and he was determined not to win HOH, like determined.
I was.
Even though you consider, okay, so this is the point where I'm like, in hindsight, I don't know if this is the round, but in any round, you had this game won, unlike any other one, particularly. If you could go back, would you go back and win this competition?
I don't know. I think for an overall gameplay, I would say that I don't think I needed to. I don't think it would have really had a different result for that week. I think for my own like pride, maybe to go back and say like looking at my like overall season 1 of Big Brother, oh look, I did win an HOH this week. Whereas like right now, like if you look at a scorecard of what did Chris do in season 1, he didn't win anything. So for my own pride, I probably would. But
right.
As like an overall gameplay, I don't know. I actually might not, just in the sense of I still do kind of agree with my motivation there for not wanting to win to not be a target, because I think as soon as people thought that I might be doing something, i.e. Lane, they love to put a big target on me again. So I was like, ugh.
Well, for the record, Lane was determined from day one to get you. I don't necessarily know why. I think it's just the like it's Chris thing, and that's probably it.
That was part of it. I think another part is the fact it feels like I stole Bradley from him, because prior to me speaking with Bradley, the most recent person Bradley had spoken with was Lane, and they had in some ways talked about working together and potentially working with Ashton and things like that.
Oh yeah,
they
had a final 2 deal before the game started.
Right. But isn't he deal with Lane?
right, exactly. Lane did a lot of lying. I think that he won. I think when he said that, probably he meant it, but there's no way that would have happened. He proved it. He proved it by voting him out.
Right. Right.
Anyway, so this is an important round, even though it's Tyler's HOH and everyone's like, "Oh, Tyler, what did he do?" Which is true. He did nothing. But like he does get Lane out of the game for the first time.
Yep.
This was the vote against Bradley's up on the block against Lane. I think your vote is obvious, but what do you know about anything behind the scenes in the Lane versus Bradley HOH or block eviction, whatever?
At this point, the monkeys were all working together, so we were all obviously wanting to get rid of Lane. I think there was a little bit of tension with worrying about if Drew was still having his feathers ruffled from the previous when Bradley was HOH. So there was some talk with Bradley and Drew and me and Drew. But at one point, I did try and like disguise the fact that I might be working with Bradley when talking with Drew. So I tried to make Lane look like a threat, but I tried to not look like I was supporting Bradley.
Right.
It was an interesting conversation I had where I think at one point I even said, I have no problem sending Bradley home.
Nice. I mean, that's a very viable strategy. Tucker here votes for Bradley to be evicted, which obviously is part of the monkeys, and I think he immediately regretted it. But why do you think that happened?
From Tucker's perspective and from what he said to us was that he had, quote, been deceived by Lane. So I'm not exactly sure what that conversation, but I do know Lane is a very good game player and has a lot of things that he says, and it's not always complete lies. And a lot of times he has a lot of truth that he says, but he uses it in a strategic way. Obviously, sometimes he does have lies or just promises that he's not going to fulfill. But I can easily see that that might have been what played into Tucker's decision to vote for Bradley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So Lane's evicted from the game. Obviously, that doesn't last, but we'll get to that. Because let's see what happens next. Oh, next is a round that in every interview I've glossed over completely, and we can, if you'd like to. Ashton's HOH, Tyler goes home.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot that was surprising that week because I think everyone, if they weren't asked Tyler, they were just kind of like, well, why like make a big drama about anyone else going home this week
Well,
when
actually,
it would be fine to just send Tyler?
I did forget that you were on the block here. This is where Ashton put you up as a replacement.
Yeah, so I did go through when she nominated me. Well, she let me know before though. She had this moment where she messaged me and she was like, "Would it be okay? Like I kind of have this idea." And so my gut instinct at first was just like, "No, I don't want to be on the block. Don't do it." But then she kind of I talked to some people, we kind of felt it all out and everyone was like, "Yeah, let's just send home Tyler." So I felt pretty safe going on the block at that point.
Right. That is where I pulled my "Chris, you are safe, Tyler, you're evicted" video.
Yes.
I enjoyed that.
Yes.
I did that on the last round of the game that's currently happening. It's always fun to throw it in.
Nice.
All right, so now it's Battleback Day, and boy, was that a day of the game that existed.
It was.
But the long and the short of it is that Lane is back in the game. Jenny is the head of household. What are your thoughts of Lane now re-entering the game?
Hated it. I mean, I loved it, but I hated it. Especially after like being in the house, was the person that I realized was the absolute number one threat, the most like likely to cause problems just because of being such a good player and being such a good social gameplay kind of person.
Well, we didn't talk about
interacting
this.
with other people.
Let's bring it up real quick. When Lane was evicted the first time, he had his big epic speech. How did that?
Right, and so that only more reinforced the fact that Lane knows how to pay attention to things and knows what to say and how to get things going and cause chaos, but in a somewhat controlled way that's going to favor himself. And so, as like a person watching the game happen, I would have been like, "Yeah, that was such a good move!" Like running out the door, but like throwing all the secrets in, while stir it all up while you make your exit. But as a person playing the game, I was like, that ruined like what everyone was doing. Like anything that people thought was like subtle and sly is now out in the open. Although he didn't quite piece it all together. He noticed that me and Bradley were probably working together, and he noticed that Jenny and Tucker were probably working together. But it's one step away from the four of us all working together.
Right, and what I'm learning about this game, especially in the situation that's happening right now, and I don't want to say it in the weird case someone is watching this or sees this before the game ends, but it is kind of the same thing. Like that is a huge step in knowledge between knowing that there are two pairs and knowing that there's four people working together. Because obviously the Monkeys was probably the driving force throughout most of the game, and no one knew it. So anyway, Lane is back in the game, and historically in Big Brother, not that this is real Big Brother, but the same game is happening. The Battleback player doesn't do very well. I don't know if they've ever won. I think they once made the final two. Maybe I'm not sure on that, but they typically do not do well. In fact, this past season of Real Big Brother, they were evicted the very next week. So
that's what I tried to push for. I was like, look, Lane already lost. We all made it here without losing. Why don't we just send him home this immediate week? And that seemed like the best plan to me. And I don't know why everyone didn't get on board with it. I mean, I do see why some of the people who were like, no, but Lane was a person we were already working with. So, of course, we're going to keep working with him. But for the people that weren't in that group, I was like, why is this not obvious to everyone? I think.
Well, in fairness, you had a chance if you had wanted to, because this is where you guys took Drew out, and I know you and Bradley were very adamant that Drew was supposed to be the one to go here.
I was adamant that Drew should go home?
Maybe not.
I don't think I would have nominated Drew. I might have been on that camp after Jenny made her nominations.
It's not.
But who did Jenny nominate?
Well, I will set the record straight on this because I remember this night very well. Jenny didn't know who to replace. Jenny was between replacing, who was it? Daniel with either Drew or Lane, and Bradley wanted it to be Drew. And this
see, Bradley did all of that because Bradley still believed that Drew was somehow out to get him, and Drew was somehow going to manage to get Bradley out of the game, which I don't understand.
Right. I think this, I mean, this is the one place in Jenny's game that could have really screwed her up, because what a lot of people didn't know is Jenny and Drew were really working together really hard. I don't know if it was like stronger than the monkeys, but she had Drew, and she wanted Allie out of the game at this point, and she didn't know if to put Drew up as a pawn or Lane up. And then Ashton texted Jenny saying, please don't put Lane up. They talk on the phone. Lane and Ashton promise to keep Drew safe if they don't put Lane up on the block, and then they immediately turn around and vote Drew out of the game.
So I did think that Jenny and Drew were working together, and I did have basically, when I first ever talked to Drew before the game started, he had said he was talking with Jenny, and so I didn't think much of it, but then I also thought, you know what, maybe they are working together. So it doesn't surprise me, but it was not something I actively was 100% sure of.
Right.
But yeah, that was a definitely a crucial point. Who went home that week would have changed a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. But not as crucial as the round a coming, and this is Tucker's HOH. This is where Ashton goes out. Talk about why you wanted Ashton out of the game at the time.
So at the time, and I think the problem is that during this round, there was a lot of discussion with the monkeys as what Tucker should do. And it starts with Bradley obviously saying that neither Lane or Ashton can go up. And that made sense from his perspective, and I kind of saw what he was coming from, but that was more of a personal feelings kind of a thing than a gameplay thing. And I think me and Tucker obviously felt like if it was going to progress and then Lane or Ashton won HOH the next week, that we were likely targets. We knew that Jenny and Bradley were not likely to get nominated by Lane or Ashton.
Mm-hmm.
And having to put up 2 more people at this point, there was only 4 options other than the 2 of them, Jenny and Bradley. So, and we figured that the 2 of them had been kind of, so if they weren't going to put up Allie either, then basically one of us was going to be on the block next to Daniel if they won HOH.
Right.
And so it was more at that point where I was like, yes, we need to get rid of one of them. But if I would have had my choice, I would have obviously picked Lane. So I don't really remember how it got decided that we were going to put up. It was Daniel and Lane originally, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know how we decided that Daniel and Lane were going to be the 2, but anyways.
Right. And so it's funny.
And I still think that. You go ahead.
No, I think you're about to say what I was going to say. So go ahead.
I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
I think even in hindsight, it's very different. But in that moment, I think you were logical in trying to get one of them out. And if it had to be Ashton, it made sense as to why. The part in hindsight that's tough is that you and Tucker were the next 2 evicted.
Right. And so I think ultimately, we saw the writing on the wall that we were less attached to other people than Bradley. And I think part of that is that, looking about my own gameplay and things I might have done differently, I was laser focused in on, this is my alliance and it's going to be effective and that's all I need to worry about. So having been more connected and talking with other people, I mean, me and Daniel had a little back and forth where we were just things as they happened. Not really just oh, hey, this just happened. This person just won HOH. What's going on? Or, oh, hey, this person just got nominated. What are you thinking? And I think at this point, yeah, after the battle back, me and Allie had started talking a little bit. Things like with as a pawn by Ashton. I talked with Allie about, hey, don't send me home, basically. But like those were very minor, and if I could go back, I think I would try and do a little more gameplay with the other players in the house and not as laser focused on the one alliance.
Right, and I think that's what Jenny does particularly well throughout the scope of the whole game.
Absolutely.
Granted, what she had going for her was at every turn, people were approaching her, so she was able to kind of build those bonds. Not that people may not have been approaching you, but she like kept being asked at anytime she would even she turned on Lane a couple times, and he would still, like right here at the Ashton vote. Ashton, I mean, this could have been stopped if Jenny or Bradley didn't vote for her, but they did, and then Lane still turned around. And worst case scenario for the Monkeys is Lane won the next HOH.
Right.
And so this is where you go out because Lane, for whatever reason, is determined Chris is the guy I got to go after, which maybe is true. Maybe if he goes after Jenny here, you win the game. I don't know, but he decides it's you.
Yeah, and I think in that moment, I can definitely see where Lane was coming from. And I, with he says, everybody tell me like how you would work with me and someone who you think you should go home. And I just like don't do that and just tell him I am obviously not going to work with you. So just send me home if you don't like.
I know you don't regret that either.
Which I still stand by.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change that. And I think I put it like one way when I was talking to the Monkeys about what was I going to say in the big chat, and I was just like, I mean, I don't know like a good lie to tell him here because like I don't even believe the lie at this point. Like I genuinely don't think I would work with Lane, so I'm like I don't even know how to lie about working with him. That's how much I don't want to work with him.
All right, pause really quick. Sorry if you're watching this. Just skip ahead a few seconds. I've gotten a very important video about the game that's happening right now, and I'm dying to know what's going to happen.
All we need is a name.
He made a stupid decision. For what it's worth, he's making a very so stupid, so stupid, so stupid.
Is that how you were like all the time during season 1 when things happened?
No, because no, because I think people didn't make stupid decisions in general. I think a lot of smart gameplay happened in your season. I'm not saying it's not happening here, but this is a bad move. What he's doing right now is it's just bad. So anyway, back to your game, and we're kind of close to the end because we're at the end of your game.
Right.
So you're evicted. What's going through your mind? Talk through the whole round, please. And I'm going to quickly set this video up.
It had been a really intense game. It had been a little bit time consuming, but also just like consuming your thoughts more than your time. And so I think I was also very stressed, and that like played into the fact of like, yeah, just send me home, because like in some ways I was already like, I don't care if I go home because I'm like very burnt out by this game. But I think if I had realized like how much faster it was going to get at that point, I would have been more like, oh, okay, like I got to stay in it, because like as soon as I left, it felt like, oh, tomorrow, now we're voting to see who wins the whole game as the jury. Not quite, but it really did seem to pick up its pace. But yeah, I was obviously disappointed. You obviously want to go as far as you can in a game like this, ultimately win. I think in my mind, I was most frustrated by the fact that it was Lane that sent me home. I think the fact that he got to come back and still was in the game and was responsible for me leaving, it just really, I didn't like that.
Right.
So I think that as a jury member, though, I enjoyed it. I got to see what was happening. I think I was pretty quick, though, to adjust from, man, this sucks, to, all right, well, now let's see what happens, and let's
Right.
try and see where people are at and shift modes.
Right. So what? So we could talk about kind of your jury, being a jury member. What that experience was like. Just observing the game, being still part of it, knowing that you have a crucial part of it at the end.
Yeah, I think that one of the interesting things about being in the jury was just kind of waiting for the next person to show up, kind of speculating based on what's going on in the game, who that next person will be. But it was also frustrating to not be in the game still, where you kind of got more of where people's motivations were. You were just kind of like getting the details.
Right.
Like this person's been nominated, this person's won HOH, those kinds of things. But it was always interesting to see basically like the kind of entrance that people made into the jury house. Obviously, Bradley, when he entered, was just like, I can't talk to anyone. I need time to process everything. I think when Lane finally showed up, I was pretty happy.
So this leads me to my like probably all. I
was most in the final two.
If what
is that I knew I didn't. Well, the reason I was most happy is the.
Wait, hold on. You're breaking up. You're breaking
have
up.
to consider.
Hold on. You're breaking up. I need you to say all that again.
Okay. The reason I was most happy that Lane was not in the final two was that I would not have to pick him to win the game.
So you're saying you would have?
Why is the connection so bad?
I don't know. It's okay. We're good now. So are you saying you would have?
I'm saying I was glad that I didn't have to consider it, because honestly, he played an incredible game, and it would have been tough to kind of analyze that aspect of it without all of the personal feelings that developed between me and Lane within the game. But yeah, I very much potentially would have voted for him to win the game, depending on if he had
against Allie. Do you vote for Lane? I think probably, but you can speak to it.
In Allie, I think I would have voted for Lane to win the game.
Against Jenny,
especially because.
Sorry, go ahead.
Especially because in the like final jury discussion where we got to talk to the final two, Lane was one of the most important aspects of Allie's discussion, filling in a lot of details and adding in a lot of support. It was helpful, and it kind of improved things that you just from what Allie was saying. Yeah. So then the tougher question, right. If it had been Lane and Jenny as the final two, I don't know. I think it would have been a very tough decision. I think based on what I specifically had in the game, I probably would have been leaning towards Lane over Jenny. I think after the actual like jury discussion where we got to ask questions, I got a lot more information about Jenny's gameplay, because I was only seeing one side of her throughout the game, which was the what is Jenny playing towards Chris as, not how is Jenny playing the whole game overall, until obviously at the end during the jury, you got to see how is Jenny. So putting that against how is Lane playing the game overall, it will, and I'm not sure 100%, but like gut reaction, who do I pick? Probably Lane.
So in the decision that you actually made, why'd you make it?
So in the decision I actually made, I've already was just hearing from both of the two final twos as to how they played their game. Obviously, like I said, Lane did a lot of details and throwing out extra information that was helpful to see Allie might have done throughout the game. But one thing was weighing on me, that the fact that Lane was throwing it out there and not Allie herself kind of didn't exactly play the same way as if Allie had just said it herself. I think one of the things that most weighed into it was when I asked my own question as a jury member to the is something the other player in the game, and if you don't think that there was something, then speak to that. And I think the answers to that question really said a lot. I think Jenny said that one of the things that Allie did better was not getting any blood on her hands, was how Jenny put it, which is true. And I think it kind of helped me realize, like, okay, Jenny did make a lot of moves where they were potentially, and so between that and hearing from Jenny at her last little closing statement, I really decided, yeah, Jenny is the person I'm going to vote for.
I'm glad you did. Not because she's my wife. Just kidding. It's because she's my wife. All right. Well, I have to wrap it up here because I have people over at my house and Jenny has made dinner and all those things. It has been wonderful to talk about this crazy game. I would love to talk to you more about it in the future. And who knows what? Oh, big question. Will you play again? Would you play again?
I would absolutely play again.
Great. Be ready for Chris Griffith on Big Brother Hometowns All-Stars coming, some point.
Watch out.
All right. For Chris Griffith, I'm Josh Consalvo. See you later.
Yeah.